Welcome to the Third Thursday podcast, where we hope to connect, encourage, and equip student ministry leaders of today. Hosted by Ben McEntee, this podcast is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain District of the Christian and Missionary Alliance. You can listen to us on all major podcast platforms, so don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to help others be connected, encouraged, and equipped to reach students with the gospel. Now let's dive in. Here's your host, Ben.
Hello and welcome to the Third Thursday podcast, the podcast for all y'all, from the jokers in the back row to the nerds up front. Yeah, I'm talking to you, youth workers, youth pastors, and folks that just love serving young people by inviting them and equipping them to live for Jesus. I'm your host, Ben McEntee, and I'm here with my co-host, the Rosencrantz to my Guildenstern. Yeah, I'm talking about Shakespeare, your friend and mine, Chris Tweedy of the RMD of the C&MA. Chris, welcome. How are you?
I don't know what Rosencrantz is. I must not be very well read. What the?
Characters from some, I can't remember what Shakespeare play.
It makes me feel better.
Hamlet, I think.
Oh, God, dang it. I was going to say, it makes me feel better if you don't know where it's from. That makes me feel a little bit better. But yeah, good to be here, man. Awesome, as always, to be hanging out together.
Yes, agreed. Hey, Chris, we're getting heady today. We're getting philosophical. But first, before we get into that, I just have a question for you, because this happened to me recently, and I'm just a little perplexed by it. Have you ever had a time when you woke up and there was just a song stuck in your head? Anything like that ever happened? You just wake up and just boom, this song's in your head.
You know, sometimes I don't know that I can remember one recently. I do know that, like, in the last few weeks, I did wake up and there was some worship stuck in my head, but kind of quasi-related to this, though. You know what's crazy? This reminds me of is I have a friend who like dreams every night and remembers his dreams, like almost every night. And I'm just fascinated by this because I don't dream a lot, and when I do, they're generally not great, and I can't remember them, you know. And he's like, no, they're like great dreams. Like, I dream about I'm at a baseball game and all this stuff, and I'm like, that, like, what a gift from the Lord, like, lucky. Like, so I don't really wake up with a lot in my head usually.
Man, no, I wish I could remember all my dreams. I can't. And the ones that I do remember that are good, then I quickly forget. Yeah. But no, I woke up and there's an old song from my childhood. It's by the Bangles, and it's called Eternal Flame. I mean, it goes, is this burning an eternal flame? Do you know this song?
I don't. Keep singing though. Keep going. Maybe it'll come.
I don't know. It's like no. And I never liked the song. I didn't like the song. That's why I woke up singing the song, and I go, I don't even like this song.
Wake up angry. Be like,
yeah. I was so why. So I told my lovely wife, Danielle, I said, hey, I woke up to this song. And she said, that's weird. And I said, yes. So you guys, I'm weird that's the moral of the story, you guys.
Some of you guys who aren't married yet, you're going to experience this if you get married, is some days you'll wake up and your spouse will be mad at you because you did something in a dream. And it's like, hey, good morning. You're like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah. That's dream me. That's not the real me. All right. That's what I say.
Make the separation. So anyway, what was your question? I feel like we went way off base.
No. It was
not very often.
Yeah. No, I just had that song stuck in my head, and I thought it was the weirdest thing. And I just wanted to put it out there into the internet because I felt like it. So there we go.
We need Joseph, the interpreter of dreams, to be like, why? What does it mean that Ben wakes up with this song?
This song stuck in my head. Yeah. It's weird. Hey, well, listen, enough of our yakking. Our discussion today is worldly community versus biblical community. Is there a difference? Really, what is the difference? Does this even matter? And why is my voice getting louder? No, okay, hold on. Okay, let's get real. This is an important conversation to have because there really is a difference, and maybe it's more, a better word to say is it's more of a distinction than a difference when we're talking about worldly community versus biblical community. And that distinction boils down, I think, to what is the stated goal? What is the motive? What is the object? What is the end game of biblical community versus what are the goals of worldly community? So, Chris, let's just dive into this discussion today. We're talking about community, and I think how we can start it off is by asking this question, right? Why is talking about community important for youth workers just in general? Why should we even be having this conversation, right? I mean, what would you say? Why is this important?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit like culture, right? Like whether you try to have a culture in your organization or your family or whatever, you're going to have one, right? So community is one of those things, like you're going to have some version of community. It may be really bad. It may be toxic. It may be great, but just because you're not thinking about it doesn't mean that you're not going to have it. And so if it's going to be there, then it behooves us to like, all right, well, if it's there, let's make it biblical and godly. Like, let's think about it and give it some time, right? So
yeah, no, I agree. I think also when it really is about culture too. And when I'm in church, when I'm with my people and enjoying them and with them, I'm always thinking about how is this different than what's taking place outside of the church walls.
Yeah.
And I think that there should be something different. I was struck by this a dear friend of mine goes to the church, awesome man of God, living for the Lord. Would say things like, yeah, man, I just love hanging out, and we go and we hike and we do these things and we do, and he's sharing all these things and they're wonderful things. And my question came up in my head, well, what's different with that inside the church versus outside the church? What is the difference? And there has to be a difference. And then I translate that. Let's just drop that into a youth group scenario. When you are gathering in your time together, right? I have a hangout time where people are just hanging out and getting together. I mean, last night we had youth group, and we actually basically took over the student union section at the local university, where we had bowling and people were playing billiards and stuff, and it was just a hangout time. And is that just what it was for? Just to play games and do that? No, it was to build a relationship. That's what I'm hoping happens. But being intentional about that is so important. So I think, like, what is happening in your youth group? What does your hangout times look like? What does community look like from that position, and then flowing into your more quote unquote spiritual times? Not to say that being in community isn't spiritual, because it is, right? But what are your outcomes? What are your hopes and dreams and desires, and focusing on the Lord in regards to what would be community for young people? I think that's really, really key, right?
Yeah. And I think the other thing with this too is if you don't answer this question, like what is biblical community? How are we living that out? What you find yourself doing is that you're going to compete with worldly community, which means you're competing with things you can't compete with, generally speaking, right? And so, that becomes frustrating. And honestly, there are things that you probably shouldn't be competing with, because they're things that typically appeal to the flesh, right? So, like thinking this through it, and knowing what you're trying to craft in biblical community, I think is really important.
Yeah. And I think it is important because we as we think about it as human beings, created beings, we're created in the image of God by a triune God who is perfect, and this beautiful unity and symmetry of who God is. I'm being all philosophical here, but that is a mirror and a type and a shadow of the community that we're called to be.
Absolutely.
as Christ's body.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah, one of the craziest verses in the Bible for me is in John. I didn't look it up to get the exact reference for this.
Yeah.
It just kind of popped in my head. But in John
Love it.
17, when Jesus is praying his sort of high
Mhm.
priestly prayer, he says,
Mhm.
"Father, I want them," and he's not talking
Yes.
about the apostles. He's actually talking about those who will believe. So that's you and me, Ben. So he
Yep.
says, "I want them to be one as you and I are one," which is just mind blowing. Like, wait a minute, like the way that the Father and the Son are one, that's how you want like everybody in the church to be. Like, that's
Yep.
ridiculous. Like that's impossible outside of the Spirit of God, right? And so, yeah, to your point, like there's actually a command. And in fact, this is one of the things, and I don't know, I don't want to jump too far ahead into the conversation, but
Go for it.
this is like biblical community. One of the differences between biblical community and worldly community. Are we good to start talking about that right now?
Hit it, man.
Yeah,
Go.
like one of them is biblical community is impressed upon us. Like it's not optional, and it's like it's a command. It's not like, hey, I've redeemed and saved you, justified before the Father. And by the way, there's this church thing. If you want to be part of it or not, whatever, your call. But it's actually this, it is from outside in, whereas worldly community typically goes inside out. Like, I want to join something. I want to belong. I want to have needs met. And it's this very sort of like inside out motivated, whereas this is an outside from us command into us. And so that's a huge difference between how the world thinks about community. So like one really practical way this would manifest itself is worldly community. You could leave. Right. In fact, I was messing around with ChatGPT, and I was just like, hey, what's community and all this stuff. And then I was like, can you leave community? And it's like, well, absolutely. And I'm like, this is funny because the word would say, no, you can't leave biblical community. Like you don't get the option, right? And this is a tremendous difference between the two types of community.
No, that is awesome. And really it does funnel down. You're talking about the high priestly prayer, which Jesus says, I've got it. I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. That is us. Like, that's us. Jesus is talking about us. That is so cool. And that they may all be one, just as you, Father, and I are one. I mean, yeah, it's his mandate, and it's rooted in who God is, and it's expressed outwards. And then it tells the world not about us. It tells the world about God. It tells the world about Jesus. And so community is important. And when a Christian goes, "Oh, I'm going to bail," and they bail, it's an act of disobedience, I would say. It is.
Yeah, and it is miraculous when it happens. John 13, Jesus says, you guys are going to love one another, and the world will know that you're my disciples. But then right after that verse you just read, he says, when you do this, when you're one, like the Father and I are one, the world is going to know that God sent me. Basically, the world is going to look at the church and be like, we know they're disciples of Jesus, but the way that they're one together is so crazy that maybe Jesus really did come from God. Like, the only explanation is that possibly Jesus is God. Like, how else can you explain this? So yeah. That's when I think about differences. That's one. You had one when you were talking about differences that, talking about how like the makeup of the group, and similarities and sameness and stuff like that. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. When I see worldly community groups together, it's generally wrapped around a same idea or a like. Or like, they like this sports team, they like this activity, they like this, and it really is kind of becomes a homogenous group of just photocopy sameness from one person to the other, and not that that's negative, but certainly that's not biblical community. When I look at it, we certainly have the sameness in biblical community, and the sameness is that our love and devotion to Jesus, right? But in that, there is so much difference outside of all that. I mean, socioeconomics are different, ethnicity is different, background, history, likes, wants, etc. Those are all radically different. But the anchoring thing is Christ, and that is so cool, and it's necessary. It's necessary.
Right.
I mean, we see all the verses about we're a body, we're diverse. There's different
Right.
parts for different things and different gifts and that. And I want that. I don't want sameness.
Yeah.
I don't want it.
And that's wired into us. And this is why you can look at like a community of like, model railroaders or something like that and be like,
Yeah.
oh, I know what holds them together. It's their love of these, little things.
Right.
But when you look at the church, what people should say is like, I don't know what holds them together except for maybe Jesus, so I'm going to use this example. This podcast doesn't go like worldwide, so I can probably get away with this. But I work in like church planning world too. That's some of my role.
Yeah.
And there for a season, it was really popular to like have these really homogenous churches. And out here in Montana and Wyoming, like you'd come across cowboy churches, and they'd be like the cowboy church, right? And I would joke, but there's some truth in it. It's like, hey, a cowboy church is a really good idea unless you're an Indian. And then it's like, well, wait, what is, like I'm not a cowboy. I ride a Harley or I have a Tesla. Does that mean I can't come to your church? And it really, I think what it should do in the church is people should come into our church, look around and say, dude, there's a Democrat sitting next to a Republican, and this guy is crazy wealthy, and he's sitting next to the janitor, the guy that like cleans his building. Like, how does this happen? And the answer that would scream out is like, look, only the Spirit of God makes this group of people a community. And when that happens, it's not like, oh, I know why they're a community. It's only Jesus. It's not that they all share some even some intellectual assent, like, oh yeah, they all hold the Bible in high regard. It's more than that. And so, I love what you're saying there about the diversity and sameness. The other thing too is sometimes, Ben, the world tries to mimic this, and they try to make communities whose unifying principle is diversity.
Right.
and it just falls apart. You're actually, not to get on a tangent here, but you're seeing this within the LGBTQ community, where certain letters of that acronym are like, wait a minute, that's not us. And it's falling apart. And it's like, well, no, but we're all together because we're all different. And it's like, that doesn't work. You can't have that. So
it doesn't work in the hands of men, but it can work when it's rooted in God. That's it.
Yeah, because the unifying principle is the Spirit, right? Exactly. That's where diversity for itself is not a unifying principle, but the Spirit of God is a unifying principle that actually creates diversity in a really beautiful way.
And the interesting thing about that is that that idea of having bringing diversity in and being together is, I believe, rooted in their knowledge, in the Imago Dei, right? In them, there's a desire to do that, but they cannot do it on their own. They're trying to do it outside of the Lord, and it falls apart. And for me, I look at that and go, oh, this points to the sovereignty and power of the Holy Spirit in the church, right? And so when the church does it well, man, it's a beacon, a shining light of like God's awesomeness. And when the church fails to do that, it diminishes that. Really, now we're talking about mission. Now we're talking about evangelism. In this, that it hurts the witness of the church. And that's real. That is so important. And through all of that, really, I think we're coming out with this distinction. It is that when worldly community is about building up me, building up me with a bunch of other me's, and biblical community is building up the Lord, and then through lifting up Christ, then we are built up. And that's the move. And how beautiful and cool is that, man? I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, youth group, for the youth leaders that are listening, as you think about your youth group, is there an element where if a new student would come one night, they would look around and be like, this is really crazy. Like there's something I wouldn't expect here,
Yes.
and again, you're not trying to make that the goal. Like the goal, all of this, we'll talk about this more when we get down to the practical part, but like all of this is a byproduct of lifting up Christ. Like you said, that is our unifying, thread, if you will, in community is the exaltation and love of Jesus. So
yes.
What are some other things that come to your mind, Ben, that are just pieces of community of biblical community that would be different or have differences?
Yeah. I think, as we were planning and preparing this, we're looking at scripture. I think Galatians 6:2, where we're talking about carrying each other's burdens, and it's carrying each other's burdens for the glory of Christ. So I'm not suggesting that people who aren't Christians don't carry one another's burdens, but the motive is different. And they are doing it, whether they acknowledge it or not, for their own selfish gain, in a manner of speaking, for their own glory. We're called to carry each other's burdens, and we get to again bring glory and honor to the Lord. I think that's something. When I talk to young people, I will say, "Hey, guess what? You get to carry someone's burden," and they go, "Oh." And why would I? And then I ask the question, why would you ever do that? Because you have a burden that is also being carried.
Yeah.
We get to mutually do that.
It's interesting when you think about like a really good gift that you've received from someone, and there's a lot of joy in getting a really good gift, right? I got my wife something for Mother's Day that I think she is like, when she gets it, it's gonna be like, this is really cool. But I will tell you, I actually think I have more joy in giving this gift to her than, like giving a gift is a great joy in and of itself, right? And so this whole idea of like the greatest thing that Jesus can call us to do, the highest joy that he can invite us into is actually in serving others. This is like a kingdom principle. And so when you see these like bear one another's burdens, it's not like, hey, put in your time. It's like, no, actually, this is the highest thing I could ever invite you into. And so, we need to kind of recognize this. This is where the world would just not get this. But and this is why you see like people that are really wealthy, right, that are not believers. They're like, I find so much joy in philanthropy and in giving and being generous. And they're like, it's crazy. And as the Christians, we're like, yeah, that's because that's actually what we were created for, is to serve one another. And so, yeah, this bearing one another's burdens, it's you're right. It's limited in the world, like people will do it for a time. Some of you guys know, man, I know a couple really sad stories of like spouses that hung with a sick spouse for a while. And then we're like, I just can't do this anymore. And it's like there are limits to how long I'm going to go with you, but we're not given those in biblical community.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, yeah, those are difficult things. I mean, if that happens, if there is people in the church who are hurting, the church is called to wrap around and to be there. And let's be honest, sometimes the church fails. And I mean, Christians, it happens. And we don't want to see that happen, but it does. And we're called again to spur one another, to carry each other's burdens. And then I'm thinking about just Hebrews, where the writer talks about just spurring one another on toward love and good deeds. I love that, the spurring on. Like, how do you describe that? I mean, just like encouraging, pushing, and just let's go, let's do this. Let's get out there and go. That is something uniquely different in the church.
And I think that speaks to our appetite or the invitation to conflict a little bit. Like getting spurred hurts. There's this proverb that says the wounds of a friend can be trusted, but there's still wounds, right? Like wounds from a friend, yeah, they're good, they can be trusted, but they still hurt. And I think one of the things that, man, I would love to see youth groups, but even just churches grow in is the ability to say, listen, this is going to be awkward and it's going to hurt a little bit, but like, I really think if I don't say this, I am doing a disservice to our friendship. I'm not loving you. Like if you were my wife, I would say this because like, I have a high value for that relationship, but because this relationship is way down here, like whatever, go be an idiot. But I think one of our calls is if we're really going to have a biblical community, this spurring one another on, to me, where that hits where the rubber meets the road is, are we willing to say, listen, there's something that I need to say to you,
Yeah.
I had a friend a number of years ago that I had done something kind of unintentionally in my mind and had really hurt him. Like it was like, man, that really hurt when you said that and the way you acted. And he actually, like 2 weeks later, he called me and said, we need to talk about this. And he just told me, and it was super hard to hear. But our friendship is so much deeper now because of that. And I'm so grateful he did it. But man, I know he probably was like, no, I should just not say anything. But it was like, no, actually, because I value you so much, I'm going to say something that may feel like a spur, but this will actually produce good. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things to think about with that, but I love that verse.
I think that's awesome. And we're talking about accountability. Sure, we're talking about confession. We're talking about forgiveness. We're talking about all of these things that are to take place. And I think that word accountability, there's one that in our natural state, we don't want accountability with others. Right. We don't. Right. I think it is only through the work of the Holy Spirit on me that I go, accountability is good.
Yeah. Well,
being a part of the church is good. I need accountability. I desire it. I want it. And it is healthy for me, even though sometimes it hurts. But that helps me course correct when I make errors, and I do because I sin. So it's so good.
We're going to talk about culture in a minute, but just like the proof to that statement, Ben, that we don't like accountability. Like, I think the greatest proof to that is the fact that if typically we say, I want accountability, so Ben, you hold me accountable. When in the reality is like, no, I'm actually going to be accountable to you. So instead of like me asking you to call me every week, I'm going to call you every week. So even in that, we're trying to push the accountability onto someone else. And it's like, no, like you want an accountability partner. That means you call me every week and you tell me how your week has been. It's not me always checking in. But yeah, you're right. That's very difficult. We should do an episode one time on, I've thought about this a lot, about how do we phrase questions to people in such a way that it truly opens the door for real feedback.
Yeah.
I really want to know what you think about this. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And we see all those things. People are like, well, I don't know. But like, how do we set ourselves up for real accountability and real input? But
no, that's good. That's good. Yeah. That's good. Well, I think to wrap up this idea of what is biblical community and then get into some practical things, Matthew 18, where this idea of where two or three are gathered, God is with us. God is there. And I just want to, we can read that and just gloss over it so quickly and not consider God's presence and the power of it. I just want to be able to sit in the thought and the idea and the beauty of God's presence with his people is powerful, and therefore something is different. Something is, we're talking about it's a distinction. This is the distinction. And in the end, it has very little, if nothing, to do with me and everything to do with him.
Yeah.
And I just want to rest in that reality. I mean, is that, could we say that that's just a tiny little glimpse of what heaven will be like? Is that acknowledging God's presence, and so don't, so when we're together, like, let's press into that and think on that. I don't think we're trying to over spiritualize this. I think we're really trying to look at uh, uh, how God's presence matters and that it is powerful. I want God, the idea of God, to be so big and so massive in young people's minds and in my mind, so that, one, I'm in awe of him, and that I have that real, genuine fear of the Lord, which brings wisdom and discernment in what is taking place in every situation that I'm in. That's what I want for myself. That's what I want for young people. And man, God, you are there. You are with us. How cool is that? How amazing is that?
I mean, what else do we have, right? I mean, this is Moses saying, God, if you don't go with us, who would even know that you're, around or with us or anything? And I do think, this is the presence of God ought to be like something that we depend on. That if, like I'll say it this way. If your evangelism plan or your discipleship plan will totally fail without the presence of God, it's probably a decent plan. Really, like one of our, historically, one of our kind of outreach strategies has been that we'll like do a dinner or a neighborhood party or something, and we'll invite people over. But we always really try to invite one or two other Christian couples with us. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that is that I'm actually counting on the fact that as we're there and the Spirit of God is in our midst, that they're just going to be like, I don't know. In fact, one of the highest compliments I ever heard from from some other friends is they had this lady at their house, and after like 2 or 3 weeks of coming over and hanging out, she said this line. It was so great. She said, I don't know why, I just always like coming over to your house. It just feels so peaceful. Mm-hmm. And it was like, that was someone recognizing, like someone far from God, that was like, I just feel things over here. Like it's just different. Right. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Ben. And that is something that we need to be aware of. We need to expect it. We need to put it on the radar, so to speak, like, hey, we're not just here singing a few songs and looking at an old book. Like we're anticipating the Spirit of God is going to show up tonight. And that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's there, and he is working. He is moving. I don't need to see it. I don't even necessarily need to feel it and to acknowledge that it is there. Again, it's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about your students. It is about what God is doing, and we're wanting him to move, and we just humbly come and say, Lord, have your way, have your way. And so I would say, don't take God's presence for granted.
Yeah.
In any youth experience you have, don't take God's presence for granted, and be praying for that. Be praying for that. So as we begin to think about wrapping up here, practical steps, right? I think really we're talking about being intentional with your youth gatherings, thinking about and praying over every facet of your time together, even the seemingly infinitesimally unimportant, like just the hangout time. But I look at those times and go, I want my leaders, who are godly men and women, to be pouring into these young people. That's what I want during those times. It is the beginning of, it is ministry time, that hangout time. Even games are ministry time when you're coming together, because you're preparing young people to share what is happening. And so that intentionality, I think here's a question. How is your community in your church different than the community surround, and the way in which they do the culture operates is different than what's happening in your church. That's something that I wrestle with quite a bit here in Bozeman, because our culture is they're out, they're doing stuff, they're hiking, and if I go on a hike with a buddy of mine from and we're fellow believers, how is that different? And it is because our conversations are different.
Sure.
And man, please make sure that our conversations are different. May they not just evolve into meaningless banter, or for men, it's so easy for it to get into, coarse joking and things like that. I mean, you just see it everywhere. It's all over. How are we going to be different, man? I want it to be different.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about intentionality, one of the things that comes to mind is, the idea of praying over these things beforehand, taking time to, Lord, hey, we're going to play games tonight. Would you help everyone to feel included? And, just like those, like youth leader, this is a really practical thing in regard to intentionality is, prayer beforehand. Another thing related to intentionality is using the language intentionally to create a culture, like even things like, this isn't like maybe the phrase you would use, but something like, hey, we're not here to get, we're here to give, even things like that, of like, this isn't about us. This is about like you should show up being like, I'm excited to be here and someone needs my encouragement today. And so like, who's it going to be? Or, like what does God have for me, to like pour in and add to the group. Right. But that's a culture that doesn't get created accidentally. In fact, even when you were talking about the presence of God, one of the things that came to my mind is some people might hear that and just say, oh, so we just sort of like willy-nilly walk our way through youth group. And it's like, no, actually, we want to talk about these things. We want, like sometimes I'll introduce a sermon, like if I'm preaching somewhere, and just say, guys, we really expect God to show up and speak to us today. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Like, this is crazy. A bunch of us gathered around a 2,000-year-old book, but even saying that, right? People start thinking about it and they're like, yeah, that's right. God is here. And so the language you use can really create culture. And, something else I'd say, maybe this is the last thing on my mind when you talk about like practically, how do we create culture or how do we create community, is I'm pretty convinced that community is a byproduct. I think when you aim for a community, it's really hard. Like, no, we're all going to love each other. Come on, start loving each other. And, someone, I think it was Mike Breen and maybe the guys from 3DM, I can't remember who I got this idea from, but they talk about the difference between like a high school reunion and a reunion of like a VWF post. And both groups of people spend about 4 years together, right? But high school reunions are like whatever. But these guys that were in war together, like, dude, they meet for like decades afterwards. And the difference is that they suffered together. There was a mission that they were on together. And so one of the best ways that you can create community is to sort of put community aside a little bit and be about the mission of God together. Right. And there will be a community that will birth out of that almost as a byproduct. And so that's something that I just observed and other people have written about. And I agree with that. If we aim for community, sometimes we get it. But if we aim for the mission of God, the exaltation of Jesus, all those kinds of things, one day we wake up and we're like, man, we have this really sweet community. Yeah. It was like, when did that happen?
Well, the community is wrapped around the mission that God gave us.
Well, I mean, if you wrap community around community, that's the same thing the world does. Like, that's really selfish, right? It's like, I'm wrapping it around my desire, but no, we're going to wrap it around Christ. We're going to wrap it around the mission, and then it will really flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in the end, community is all about, biblical community is all about Jesus. Yeah, it's all about him. And I love that. What's the mission? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Let's go towards that, and then community will wrap around that, and it will take some intentionality, certainly.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
But it goes. I think that's good. I think that's awesome. Excuse me, Chris. This has been an awesome conversation. I love it. And biblical community matters. It matters to young people. They are desperately seeking community, and the world is desperately seeing it. And we know that true community that was intended for us as created beings comes only in and through Jesus and the work of the Holy Spirit. So may that just be, we just want more and more of that for you in your church, in your youth group, everywhere you are, in your home, to make it a peaceful place when people come. I mean, I love that story too, Chris, but let's spur one another on towards that. So, hey, as we're wrapping up, we ask these 3 questions. Here they are. How does this conversation, how does it affect you and your leaders? How does it affect your students? And how is God being honored through all of this? Chris, this has been an awesome conversation. Listener, if you're hearing this, please check out the show notes for additional resources and all that wonderful stuff. And if this has been helpful, like, share it with someone. We're not trying to be, the Conan O'Briens of the world or anything. We're just out here chatting about biblical things and Christian community and all that good stuff. So if you have someone that this would be a blessing to, share it. And if you need anything, reach out to us. We are here for you. Rocky Mountain District youth workers, we love you. We're here for you. We cannot wait to see you at council and conferences and all that good stuff. So, hey, for myself and for Chris and from everyone here at the Third Thursday podcast, we will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Third Thursday podcast. We hope you're leaving feeling connected, encouraged, and better equipped to reach students with the gospel. For more resources, head to rmdcma.com/youth. If this episode was helpful, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next time.